Tonight, what does Russia really want? Moscow claims it's ready for quick peace in Ukraine, but says a temporary ceasefire is a crazy idea. Russia's ambassador to the UK instead accuses Britain and France of not wanting to end the war and says the fighting will continue until Ukraine agrees to cede territory and become a neutral, non-nuclear state.
Multiple plans about ceasefire temporarily for 1 month in the air and in the sea. It's a crazy idea. We will never accept it, and they are perfectly aware of that.
So can the two sides meet in the middle, and just how worried should the rest of Europe be? I'll ask the former head of MI6. In Bangladesh, the refugees forced to fight by the very military accused of genocide against their people. And I'll speak live to the Afghan women's cricket team, now in exile, about their fight to be recognised by cricket's world governing body. That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. We've been talking a lot the past few weeks about what peace in Ukraine could actually look like. We've heard from Donald Trump, we've heard from Volodymyr Zelenskyy, but one point of view has been missing from all of this, the view from Russia. Because no matter what's agreed between Washington and Kiev, Washington and Europe, a truce won't hold without Moscow's buy-in. Today, I tried to get into the mind of the Kremlin by sitting down with the Russian ambassador to the UK, Andrei Kelin. We talked for half an hour. He seemed to be brimming with confidence, even cautiously optimistic. And if you think about it, things can't get much better for Russia. They have a US president who seems to be negotiating on their behalf, while Ukraine's leader has fallen out of favour with Donald Trump. But President Zelenskyy is still being backed by Europe. That's why the ambassador blamed the UK and France and the so-called coalition of the willing for blocking a quick path to peace. There are a few hints coming up about what Russia would be willing to accept. We'll discuss them in a moment. But first, have a listen to our conversation.
It is not for the first time we are talking with you, and I will only repeat what we are saying right now. We have done everything to settle it down by diplomatic efforts. Diplomatic efforts, Minsk I, Minsk II. We continue to negotiate, to talk. If there has been an acceptance of Minsk II, then Donbass will be part of Ukraine, autonomous, but still part of Ukraine. Ukrainians did not, government of Ukraine, not Ukrainians, but we share between the government and the rest of Ukraine and people of it. I believe that people understand it differently. Ukrainians, the government of Ukraine did not accept a peaceful settlement. If you will look into what has been achieved in the draft treaty in Istanbul, and I have looked at it once again, it is an interesting thing, really, because the bulk of political settlement, including the guarantees, was in the treaty. That was draft. It has not been finished, but it contained very important provisions of what we are talking right now about. And we suggest that the future negotiations will be based on this draft, which is a fundamental one.
Do you think that President Trump on this issue is on Russia's side?
Well, he is on his own side. He is on the American side, and he is on the side of the common sense. He says that this is a bloody thing which is going on. Too many people has been killed. We should do it quickly. This is being heard by the European leaders, but instead of that, they are just saying everything which is contrary to that. They are saying we are going to put boots on the ground in Ukraine, sending planes, everything. And they know that this is not acceptable to us from the very beginning, all these plans. Because
so British troops, French troops, not acceptable on Ukrainian soil?
Absolutely, because they are still NATO country troops. It will involve building bases on the Ukrainian territory. By the way, United Kingdom was always dreaming to build bases in Mariupol and Mykolaiv, maritime bases. It was all in the plans, in the previous plans. So we do not accept that, and we categorically reject that. And I will say to you more, because in this draft treaty, which has been nearly agreed in Istanbul, there are guarantees. It is even called on neutrality of Ukraine and international guarantees. There is a provision on that which does not involve putting boots on the ground in Ukraine.
President Zelenskyy says, and the Europeans believe, that hundreds of thousands of troops are going to be needed to ensure that Russia doesn't do what it did in 2022.
First, it is, as I said, our position is very contrary to that. Second, I do not understand what they are going to do over there, because they have no mandate. It means that they do not understand their tasks. They have no rules of engagement, how to use force and against whom. So just sitting in the cities, it's senseless. What I have heard in the morning, like NATO aviation is going to patrol nuclear stations just in case. All the time, all of that, it is just plans which has been elaborated, we said it on the knee, just not for reality. It is just something came out of the head. But what's the aim of it? The overall aim is to prevent Americans seriously discuss with us the issue of peace.
What has been discussed with the Americans? What are the key things that Russia has told the Americans that they need out of this?
I was not present during this many hours meeting in Riyadh. Actually, I cannot say that I know every word of that, but we laid out our position, which is pretty simple, I will say, because it has been spoken by the president many times starting June. What we need is a new Ukraine as a neutral, non-nuclear state, that issues of neo-Nazism and nationalistic should be out of law, no discrimination with Russian people, sanctions abolished, of course, and territorial situation should be recognized, the realities should be recognized.
But this is territory that Russia has taken over the course of 20% of Ukrainian territory over the course of the last 2 years, 3 years has been taken by Russia.
Do you want that we leave it just like that? This is not a possibility. We guarantee people that are living on these territories that they will live in normal situation, non-discriminatory, and these territories has been included in our constitution, and we will continue to push that all forces of Ukrainian government will leave these territories.
Do you think the Americans will give you that, the territory that has been taken?
No, I don't think that we have discussed it seriously over there. We have laid our position, and what I have read that Americans actually they understand the reality, and I wouldn't say that they're surprised, but they understand it. Further on, we do not have now talks with the Americans or the Europeans. All the conversation is going on inside the Europe. And the whole purpose of all this mass or EDO, I will say, of every day's meeting here, there, mostly in Paris, over there, is just to present something to Trump. Although
what do you
not
think,
to us, but to Trump.
What do you think they're trying to present to Trump? What are they trying to get out of it?
I have seen already multiple ideas, multiple plans about ceasefire temporarily for 1 month in the air and in the sea. It's a crazy idea. We will never accept it, and they are perfectly aware of that. We will only accept the final version when we are going to sign it.
The concern from the Europeans is this isn't just about Ukrainian territory. It's not even about Ukraine joining NATO. That the intention of Vladimir Putin, of Russia, is well beyond Ukraine, to recreate the Russian Empire, that countries like Moldova should be incredibly worried. We're talking here today, should those European countries be worried that Russia is going to use the same excuse it used in Ukraine, that we are here to protect the Russian-speaking population, that you could do the same thing in those other territories? I
would make a certain division in your question, because first of all, of course, we heard what President Macron has said yesterday in France in his address. This is nonsense, what he is saying. Russia does not threaten France. or United Kingdom. Here in the United Kingdom, they are very good in inventing threats, I will say. As I have said, we are threatening in cyberspace, in the air, on the sea, and all of that. Looks like UK is living in a terrible situation here, which is encircled by Russia, and soon it will, of course, to raise a white flag and actually surrender. All of that is absolutely silly things which has been invented by politicians whose position is very shaky, I will say, right now. They do not want to deal with internal affairs because they are very complicated, I will say, let it be France or United Kingdom, but they would like to have an international profile, like big leaders of something. It makes us laugh, of course, both these inventory, the threats, an idea of threat. Russia is not threatening to anyone. We are not threatening neither United Kingdom, nor France, nor any other country in Europe. It makes no sense. But the other thing is, of course, situation with the Russian population. And countries should take into account that there are Russians in Moldova, Moldavia, in Baltic countries, and they should respect the rights of Russian people, rights for language, right for education, right for the church and its religious conviction. All of these things should be taken into account.
Is that a threat?
Do you see a threat with what I have said?
You're saying they should...
Normal countries, they just deal normally with the national minorities. Let's take Belgium, let's take Ireland. Just imagine if in Ireland they will go to prohibit English language, or in Switzerland they will prohibit Italian or German. It will be an uprising, of course, and the governments will go in every country. Why you deny this right to Russians living in these countries? Of course, they have a say in different situations.
You said that about Ukraine, and that was the reason you say that you annexed Crimea and the territory that we're seeing now. You're saying it's Russian-dominated and Russian-speaking citizens, and therefore you are there to defend them. Will you use that same excuse for these other countries and territories? If you feel they're not being respected?
Well, I just answered this question. I do not see why I should answer it. Once again, only on the annexation of Crimea, this is really funny because population of Crimea consists of Russians. And they have made a referendum. They do not want to live with Ukraine. As simple as that. Referendum is part of the United Nations Charter, and self-determination. This is part of the United Nations Charter. It is absolutely legal.
President Zelenskyy has put a proposal forward now and said that he is willing to accept peace and these ideas that led by President Trump. Do you accept that idea as well, that President Zelenskyy wants to come to the negotiating table and wants to negotiate with Russia?
The person whom we do not believe at all, this is President Zelenskyy. He was saying one thing in Oval Office, it was clear, and we have all heard of that. He didn't want to talk about peace or settlement or anything. He was very belligerent. And his complete turnover 48 hours later, this does not convince us.
Well, his country, I mean, his country is on the line. We do not trust him. We do not trust him at all. It's a guy, but if it will be necessary, besides, he is illegitimate since he was not elected during the elections, did not have happened for very long. But if it is needed, we even will have to talk to him as well. I mean, many would say the same about President Putin, that elections are not free and fair in Russia.
No, come on, it is, who has said it? He's a complete idiot, because the level of trust of President Putin is 87%. I'm
just going to, before we wrap up, just read you what President Zelenskyy's proposal is. He says, we are ready to work fast to end the war, and the first stages could be in the release of prisoners and truce in the sky, ban on missiles, long-range drones, bombs on energy and other civilian infrastructure, and truce in the sea immediately, if Russia will do the same.
He makes statements every day, or in the morning and in the evening. They are very controversial. Sometimes he wants this, sometimes he wants that.
But this is him saying, I want it faster.
Okay, why not? It is. We will see what he's going to do, not to say, because he changes his mind every day. So we do not trust him at all. As for prisoners, we have much more prisoners, Ukrainian prisoners in Russia than they do have Russians. These exchanges are going on. As for the air, this is funny because we have dominance in the air and they nearly have no flights. So what he's talking about, I do not comment on the rest of it. It is.
And I just want to pose another question to you. I mean, you said that Russia isn't a threat to the UK and it's not working. You say that Russia isn't a threat to countries like the UK and France. Do you think the UK is helping or jeopardizing the current path to peace?
At the moment, UK is at the head of those who are resisting quick peace. Although who will be the leader here? I hear France would like to be the leader of this movement in Europe. UK also would like to have a leading position. Germany also would like to have a leading position in the efforts of rearmament, in the efforts of political things and all of that. If they will really pass this silly decision of rearmament of Europe, then what they are going to do with these toys after the conflict will be over? They will just sit with projectiles and other ammunition, excessive one. Okay, let's do it. If this is none of our business.
Well, the UK, like the rest of Europe, believes that Russia is a threat.
UK is saying it all the time. Just listen to what they are doing in the parliament. They are claiming that we are the threat to the UK every other day, if not every day. So I'm sick and tired of that.
That was the Russian ambassador to the UK. And as I was sitting down with the ambassador to discuss the situation in Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy was in Brussels for an emergency summit with EU leaders. They discussed further support for Kyiv and how they would look to increase defence spending to protect themselves from future attacks. The continent is scrambling to decide how to repel the threat from Russia in the wake of Donald Trump's decision to pause weapons supplies to Ukraine and stop sharing military intelligence. Our international correspondent Diana Magnay has this report from Washington.
For all Donald Trump's push for peace, Russia is not holding back on its attacks on Ukrainian cities. Here in Kryvyi Rih, Volodymyr Zelensky's hometown, at least 4 killed in an overnight strike on a hotel. But there is some progress on the political front. Talks planned for next week, again in Saudi Arabia, this time between the US and Ukraine.
I think it'll be a good meeting. I really do believe that. Hopefully that'll be a good signal to the Russians, because they have been proactive too in wanting to get something done here. And I think that's what the president, that's who he is. He's a peace through strength president.
Just in case his peace through strength presidency favors Russia, Europe is making its own plans, agreeing at an emergency summit in Brussels to free up around 650 billion euros to spend on defense. And in the US, Britain's Defense Secretary John Healey met with his US counterpart, who expressed his gratitude that the UK and Europe were stepping up. Like his president, Valentin Koshelenko is from Kryvyi Rih. Now in the United States, he volunteers to support Ukraine from afar, but fears Trump's rush for peace.
He pressed Ukraine to end this war in a faster way, but this is for Ukraine that means capitulation, basically.
All Ukrainians have a dream, real dream, to have a peace in Ukraine. But the second dream is to have guarantees that this kind of mass wouldn't be happen again.
Their future in the United States is also not guaranteed, after reporting on Thursday that Donald Trump might revoke the temporary legal status of Ukrainian refugees. The White House says no decision has been made at this time on the status of Ukrainians in the United States, but that surely means that it's under review, adding uncertainty to the lives of tens of thousands who fled their homeland. But that's what this presidency so far has been all about, uncertainty in people's lives, in the markets, for the whole post-World War II world order. In the Oval Office, the torrent of signings of fresh executive orders continues, against the backdrop of a freshly appropriated Gulf of America poster. Donald Trump says he'll be visiting Saudi Arabia within the next 6 weeks. Whether he'll be meeting with Putin or Zelenskyy then, or both, still not clear. Diana Magnay, Sky News, Washington.
Now, in my interview with the Russian ambassador, you may have heard references to Istanbul and the failed peace talks that took place there in 2022. Let's just remind you about the terms of the temporary truce offered by Ukraine and what Russia demanded 2 years ago. Now, Ukraine has proposed the release of Russian prisoners and an immediate truce in the sky and sea. They want a ban on long-range attacks on energy and civilian infrastructure, but only if Russia does the same. The Ukrainian president says he's willing to sign a mineral deal with the US, but wants security guarantees, including at least 100,000 troops to patrol the border. Well, today, Ambassador Kelin told me Ukraine must become a neutral, non-nuclear state and that it should recognize Russian-held territory. In our interview, the ambassador appeared to suggest that Russian proposals from the start of the war could be a starting point for negotiations. In 2022, Moscow demanded that Russia becomes an official language of Ukraine. They also suggested the Ukrainian army should be reduced to 50,000 personnel and called for restrictions on military hardware and the Air Force. An abandonment of Ukraine's commitment to join NATO and a Russian veto on the international response to any future attacks by Moscow were the other big demands. Well, let's bring in our Europe correspondent, Siobhan Robbins in Brussels, and our US correspondent, David Blevins, who joins us from the White House. Thank you both for joining us. Let's go to you first. David, I mean, we've seen the flurry of diplomacy taking place in Europe, and we're going to speak to Siobhan about that in a moment. But of course, in the last hour or so, we've heard from Donald Trump, who has suggested that he himself may find himself in Saudi Arabia in the Middle East to discuss peace in Ukraine.
Yes, Yalda, he says he may travel there in the next month or month and a half, and I think that is a clear indication that despite the concerns of people like President Macron and Prime Minister Keir Starmer, the president is determined to press ahead with his plan to get a deal and get a deal done quickly. A couple of hours ago, his peace envoy, Steve Witkoff, said that they did recognise the concerns of leaders in France and the United Kingdom. In fact, he described them as stakeholders, but added that the United States had Russia in, and I quote, a good place. And it's clear that they now want to capitalise upon that. Remember, Donald Trump likes the world to see him as a peacemaker, and he is the transactional president. So we shouldn't be terribly surprised that he's talking about going to Saudi Arabia himself if he thinks they're going to clinch a deal. Let's listen to some of what he had to say.
We've made a lot of progress with Ukraine and a lot of progress with Russia over the last couple of days. That to an end, so we don't have to talk that way about nuclear. It'd be great if everybody would get rid of their nuclear weapons. You know, we have Russia and us have by far the most. China will have an equal amount within 4 or 5 years. And it would be great if we could all denuclearize, because the power of nuclear weapons is crazy.
In many ways, it's hard to believe it's just 6 days since President Zelenskyy was asked to leave the White House without a deal done. Since then, of course, America has ramped up the pressure, withdrawing military aid for Ukraine, suspending its sharing of intelligence, something deemed above politics until this point. But as far as the man in that building is concerned, that approach is having the desired effect.
Yeah, David, a week is a long time in politics. Let's go to Siobhan, and things are moving so quickly. Siobhan, as David was saying there, just a week ago, or 6 days ago rather, President Zelenskyy was virtually ejected from the White House. And then we've seen several emergency summits, the one in London and, of course, the one today in Brussels, which is being described as a sort of watershed moment.
Yes, that's right. What a stark difference, the scenes coming out of Brussels today when leaders embraced Volodymyr Zelenskyy compared to what we saw, that very tense conference in the Oval Office almost a week ago now. But we have seen movement here already. Today, for hours now, EU leaders have been meeting to discuss two things. One, a big deal to unlock potentially billions of euros of defence funding, and the other one, a statement of support for Ukraine. So what have they actually managed to get done? Well, the statement of support for Ukraine, 26 of the member states have agreed that, and that includes things such as ensuring that there's a just and lasting peace, pledging to continue to put pressure on Russia with sanctions, ensuring that Ukraine's territorial integrity is respected, things that actually directly contradict some of the demands that you heard from the Russian ambassador when you were speaking to him earlier. But as I said, 26 of the 27, Hungary, the problem child of the EU, couldn't be brought round and hasn't signed that. What they have all managed to agree, though, all 27, is that those plans to unlock potentially billions of euros of extra defence spending. Now, this is very first step on the road. There will be more talks about how this is going to work at the end of the month. And the devil really will be in the detail. But as it stands, a united front, at least, from EU members on that point.
Yeah, indeed. As you say, Siobhan, I mean, the devil really is in the detail at this moment now. Thanks so much for bringing us up to date, both of you. And, of course, you can scan the QR code on the right of your screen. You'll be able to watch that interview I had with the Russian ambassador in full. Now, coming up, we'll get some more reaction to those comments from the Russian ambassador. I've been speaking to the former boss of MI6, John Soares, about Russia, Trump and the state of the British intelligence service. And a special report from the camp in Bangladesh, where Rohingya Muslims who've escaped violence at home are now facing a new threat.
Here we go.
2, 1.
You, Sophie.
The big announcement. The battle for number 10.
The drone is above us.
It is a chaotic scene.
They've asked us to leave.
It is a clear Labour landslide.
A car is covered in.
Liberated, but left in ruins.
A major incident has been declared.
That's when misinformation floods the zone.
It became clear the media weren't welcome.
These extraordinary images.
Must have taken years.
Who wants to talk about politics? OK, stand by.
I wouldn't be asking it if I didn't think it was a relevant question.
The winner of the 2024 presidential election.
Quite extraordinary events.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We start with breaking news.
Historic day here today.
The golden age of America begins right now.
A long-awaited ceasefire is now underway.
First question, Sky News.
This is a huge moment.
It's incredible.
Now to California.
Do you owe citizens an apology? Have you nothing to say?
Jane Secker, Sky News. Would you like to respond to us now?
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
In principle, would you agree to do that?
Criticism of you is banned. How is this a fair election?
The cameras are poised, waiting to see what the president might do next.
Thank you. Thank you all.
We're going to do this 100 times every day for the next 3 months.
Why have we agreed to this?
Raises many questions about many things.
Actually seeing people impacted, she was so upset.
It was powerful. They kind of couldn't believe they were being berated here.
Very much on my terms, I think was the subtext. News happens fast around Donald Trump.
It was a kind of wow moment.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, doesn't it?
It's Trump world, and we just live in it.
So, where next?
Follow Trump 100 wherever you get your podcasts.
When you cover big, tense protests, there's almost always a moment when the atmosphere changes. There's a different noise, and you start to smell tear gas in the air.
As a team, we've interviewed some of the biggest stars in the world. Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt. It can be incredibly surreal being swept up in their world, but we try to give you an honest sense of how these people really are.
When we spoke to the fishermen down in Cornwall, all the politics from Westminster was a million miles away. This was about their jobs, their livelihoods.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there.
Well, a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Welcome back. The US's deteriorating relationship with Ukraine hasn't just seen weapons shipments pause, but also the withdrawal of intelligence the United States has on Russia. Today I spoke with Sir John Sawyers, the former head of MI6, Britain's secret intelligence service, to gauge the impact of those decisions and the question of whether Donald Trump was still a reliable partner to the West. Have a listen.
It's Russian propaganda. And I think we need to treat it as such. What the Russians want to achieve in Ukraine is the destruction of an independent Ukrainian state. They want to subjugate Ukraine and make it part of Russia's sphere of influence. They've been pretty clear about that all along. That's what President Putin has been saying at every stage. And Britain and other European countries are trying to resist that. Now, I think the American actions of the last few weeks have been given real encouragement to Moscow and has enabled Russian ambassadors like the one you spoke to be more cocky and confident than they had been before. But also, the sad truth is that the change in American policy has tilted the strategic balance in Ukraine in Russia's favor. And we've got to do everything we can to keep Ukraine in the game. Now, maybe it's a badge of honor for the Russians to identify Britain as in the lead in this effort. But I don't think we should take literally what the Russians are saying. We should watch their behavior. I think at some point the Americans will discover that the obstacle to peace in Ukraine isn't President Zelenskyy, isn't the Ukrainians, it's Russian ambitions. And then we'll see how President Trump and his administration respond.
We've been seeing a flurry of diplomatic activity over the course of the last few weeks, and there is major concern that we're also seeing a split in the transatlantic relations. I just want to get your take on just the current state of play.
Well, it has been turbulent the last few weeks. I think we've seen an approach by the United States administration that is unheard of, really, that in the United Nations they should be voting with Russia against their European allies on a matter of European security. I think we've seen them taking an approach towards the conflict in Ukraine where they're basically siding with the invader and putting pressure on the victim in that conflict. And this is obviously of great concern in Europe.
Do you view the Trump administration as an unreliable partner for now for Europe?
It's an unpredictable partner. I don't think they're at the stage where they're unreliable, but we need to carry on talking to them. I've spent 30-odd years working in the British government, and most of our biggest differences were with the Americans, whether it was over doctrine during the Cold War, whether it was over the wars in the Balkans, or how we pursued our interests on counterterrorism. There have always been transatlantic differences. They take a lot of communication to work through. This is of a slightly different order, I have to say. I think the scale of change that the Trump administration has brought about is something which I've not witnessed in my lifetime, and we have to rise to that challenge.
Is this a moment of reckoning for Europe, and do you think that it can step up?
Well, certainly Europe has been taking advantage of the level of US defense and security support that we've had, especially in the ongoing period since the end of the Cold War. And it's quite clear to me that we're going to have to step up the capacity of Europe to defend itself. I think we made the first step of that in this country with the increase in defence spending from 2.3 to 2.5% of GDP. I'm not sure that's going to be enough. It's not just a question of replenishing existing arsenals that have been diminished or declined over the years or given to Ukraine. It's about learning the lessons from the battlefield of Ukraine and witnessing how the Israelis have turned the tables on their adversaries in the last 18 months since the Hamas atrocity.
And you think that we still have that approach here in Britain?
Well, the last 20 years has been geared around expeditionary warfare in Iraq, Afghanistan, and so on. We need to gear ourselves back to territorial defence of Europe, which means patrolling the North Atlantic, patrolling the skies above Northern Europe, and having the capacity to deploy armed forces into Central Europe. Now, we do have the capacity to do that, for sure, but it requires a lot of investment to be the best and to be at that threshold where the Russians will really take us seriously.
What do you think the end game is here?
On what?
For Russia, for the United States?
I don't think there is an end game. I think there's an ongoing struggle for position and for national power. In a sense, what's changed is there are hints that the Americans are moving in the same direction as the Russians and Chinese of becoming an imperial power, of becoming focused on their own national territory, expanding their territory and their control of their own space, rather than projecting values and projecting ideas and projecting security to others. Now, that is an area of concern. I think what the Russians want to do is they want to recreate a sphere of influence which over the former Soviet space. They want an area of neutrality in what used to be the Warsaw Pact countries of Central Europe.
And what can Britain do in its current position?
Well, I think we can play a diplomatic role of helping the Americans understand the full scale of the implications of the route of the paths that they're on. I think we can play a very important role, even outside the European Union, to galvanise a common European response. And we need to think through how we defend Europe with America being less reliable than it has been in the past.
Sir John, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
That was Sir John Sawyers, the former head of MI6. And just in the few minutes ago, we just received some information coming in from the Ukrainian port city of Odessa, which has, in the last few years, endured some of the worst attacks on its civilian and energy infrastructure. And this information coming in says there's been a new Russian drone attack on the port city, which has damaged energy infrastructure and it's triggered fires. And as we were talking earlier with the Russian ambassador to the UK, one of the things that Volodymyr Zelenskyy has proposed is a sort of a truce that would lead to the stopping and prevention of attacks on energy and civilian infrastructure. But as we can see there tonight, just in the last few minutes, we've received a bit of breaking news about a Russian drone attack on the port city of Odessa, which has targeted or damaged the energy infrastructure there and triggered fires. And this is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. And next up on the programme, our Asia correspondent reports from Bangladesh and hears of a new threat facing Rohingya Muslims.
Once almost lost, these denizens of the deep are back.
The problem for these whales is global warming. Water temperatures are rising.
We're worried that the animals are actually starting to starve.
Deadly and outdated. What do you think should happen to the net?
I would like to see them go.
I'm Nicole Johnston, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Beijing.
A towering monument to the China dream and its demise.
From one end of this country to the other, China is littered with real estate that's falling apart.
China is facing a tsunami of the elderly.
We have to work as long as health allows, otherwise, no money.
China is under pressure to pay for the pensions of 500 million retirees. I've reported on a wide range of stories from around the world.
Mass protests forced the president to flee.
The sight of the president's private swimming pool only reinforces to Sri Lankans the great divide here between rich and poor.
Aid groups say Gaza is now the world's most dangerous place to be a child.
The Israeli army has raided towns and villages all over the West Bank. These tunnels run all over Gaza. The Gaza Strip is ridden with them.
A referendum designed to unite the country has only deepened its divide.
Sydney's floodplains underwater again.
This is the third or fourth time in 18 months that their homes have gone under.
Sky News, the full story first.
It may seem like a gimmicky toy, but it is part of the global race between the United States and China for new technology. This elite engineering designed to humour and to help us.
Gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live.
Joins us live.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, DC.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. Now, you may remember these images. They are from back in 2017 when more than 700,000 people from the Rohingya minority fled to Bangladesh after a campaign of massacres, rape and arson by Myanmar's military. Since then, they have lived in makeshift flood-prone camps, waiting to return home. Some of them do go back, but only after being forcibly enlisted and made to fight for the very army who committed atrocities against their people. Sky's Asia correspondent Cordelia Lynch has been hearing from some of those who fought and survived.
This is Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, a mass of humanity, the fragile home of a persecuted minority, Rohingya people, mainly Muslims from Rakhine State in Myanmar, fleeing an escalating civil war there. But they're not safe here either. Some are being forced back to the country they fled to fight for the army accused of a genocide against their people in 2017. Jarker says he was abducted by recruiters at gunpoint.
Many of our Rohingya boys who were taken by force from the camps were killed in battle. So many people lost their lives.
How did it feel being forced to fight for a regime accused of a genocide against your people?
It was heartbreaking. They targeted children from poor families. The children of wealthy families avoided it by paying money.
The military needs manpower. It's losing ground in Myanmar. In Rakhine, the Arakan army, an ethnic armed group, is on the verge of taking full control. That power shift is having a big impact in the camps.
The situation here in Cox's is desperate. People are disillusioned by poverty, violence, and the plight of their own people. Some are being forced to fight, but others are going willingly, claiming they need to battle for their own survival. It's estimated there could be between 3,000 and 5,000 fighters who have joined armed groups from here. An already insecure place does feel a lot more precarious.
Both the military and the Arakan army are accused of committing atrocities against Rohingya Muslims. These men insist they won't take up arms for either side, but they will for their own cause.
We want to fight for our rights because we have been demanding justice for a long time. But the situation has become unbearable. That is why we are fighting. Those who fight for Rohingya rights should not be called terrorists. They are standing for justice.
These shores are shaped by despair. The military denies forcing Rohingya back to the battlefield, but the camps tell a different story, one of surging violence and vulnerability. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh.
There are signs tonight that the Pope's condition is improving. The Vatican says the 88-year-old remains in a stable condition, and because of that, they would not release another update until Saturday. We've also heard from Pope Francis himself with this voice note released this evening. Tonight, the message was played out to the faithful gathered in St. Peter's Square. Have a listen.
I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your prayers for my health from the square. I am with you from here. May God bless you and the Virgin protect you. Thank you.
A message there from the Pope to the faithful. Now, to be a woman in Afghanistan today is to be a woman without key fundamental rights. You're banned from high school and university. You're banned from speaking in public and speaking to other women. You cannot travel alone, drive a car or use a smartphone. My next guests fled the country because they were banned from playing the sport they love. They are members of the Afghan women's cricket team who currently reside in Australia. Despite multiple calls for cricket's governing body to create a refugee team to allow them to play on, their pleas have up to now been ignored. Well, joining me now are the two members of the team, Firooza Amiri and Benafsa Hasimi. Welcome, both of you, to the show. Firooza, I'd like to begin with you because before you left Afghanistan, you were given a sort of a contract by Afghanistan to play for the country. But of course, you were never able to realise that dream and you had to flee, eventually seeking asylum to Australia.
Hi, Yalda. Yes, such a hard situation that we have passed as a team together. We got the contract in 2020 and we were very ready to play for Afghanistan and join the competitions, and that was all our dreams, that to play and represent Afghanistan. But in 2021 everything changed and we forced to leave Afghanistan for our safety and come to a country like Australia. That's a completely new country in terms of culture and language, and we have faced so many challenges leaving Afghanistan and starting new life in Australia.
Benafsa, I'm going to come to you now because, like Firooza and so many other of your teammates, you too, of course, fled Afghanistan as well. But in Australia, you were able to play and you've been able to train as well.
First of all, hi everyone. Yeah, we had really good chance and opportunity here. When we came here, first thing what we saw was a bat and ball they have given to us, and we just play it, just a kind of small game, a friendly small game together, which was very nice. But mainly we have opportunity here to play and train and have games in the local clubs.
And, you know, as Firooza was saying there, I mean, cricket, like all sports for women in Afghanistan, has been banned. You are now calling for the ICC to potentially support and back a refugee team for you in exile. Just tell me a little bit more about that.
Yes, so what we have done... Sorry, Firooza, you want to go?
Go ahead.
No.
Go ahead, Firooza.
Sorry, yes. As I said, we were so young that leave everything behind and come to Australia. But when we were leaving Afghanistan, we had the hope that we have the ICC behind us, who's going to support us. But it was a completely wrong idea, because when we arrived in Australia, we have sent a couple of letters to ICC, but we never get any response, any official response from the ICC. So despite that, all challenges that we have faced, despite all the political things that are going on in Afghanistan, we are continuing to play cricket in here as a team. And we are really need the support of the ICC, because this is the ICC job to recognize us as a team. We left Afghanistan with no choice. That was because of our safety. If ICC can guarantee that we're going to be safe, I'm sure that for playing for Afghanistan, we all going to go back to Afghanistan. But we left Afghanistan, came here, we didn't receive any support from the ICC.
Which is what I was going to ask Benafsa. Have you received any response? I mean, Firooza just confirmed that you haven't. Given that you haven't, have you been left feeling disappointed by this situation?
Of course. As a team leader, like as a national council, what they have to do is just give rights equal to everyone. Like support everyone equally, not just because we are from Afghanistan, we are women, we have to be disappointed and ignored by them. So they should a bit wake up and see what's going on here and give us a bit of chance at least to see how we go.
And Firooza, it's been quite controversial, the idea that the men's team has played on the international stage. And of course, they played with England just about a week and a half ago or so. What are your feelings around that? Because there were calls to perhaps boycott the game or you know, draw attention to the situation of women and girls in Afghanistan, especially because the men's team have been accused of not coming out and speaking up when it's come to the issue of women and girls being banned from playing sports in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to answer this question, because you see them, we are in the same position, but they are playing in championship trophy and you are not. I mean, for many of us, like all the team, we believe that boycotting men's team won't impact on our team. Because the situation that men's team are going through, we really don't know that why they are silent. That might be for their safety. But as I say, at the end of the day, everything comes to the ICC to recognize us as a refugee team or as a team that we can continue playing cricket. Because we really disappoint with the ACB. They are not doing anything for women's. In fact, the Taliban are on the regime and they can't do anything. But we're really looking for the support of the ICC to change this situation.
And Benafsa, what message do you have to the ICC?
Of course, one thing, we really don't want anything from them except our rights. We want just the rights we need and everyone deserves. So we just want that, please, at least accept our refugee teams and give us support to develop our team. It's not just because of 19 players in here. It's a dream for all of girls around the world. It's not just me or Firooza or my other teammates. there are lots of other girls who wants to play. What we want is just give our rights. We deserve better.
Firooza, just tell us briefly about the situation for women and girls in Afghanistan. I often talk about it. We just described a little bit before we came to you, but you must have family still in the country and girls that you know in the country. What are they telling you about the situation there now?
Yeah, I mean, every time I'm hearing from my families that they're talking about themselves, I really start crying. In fact, look where we are living, in a country, in a world where everyone is equal. But in Afghanistan, we can see that injustice and inequality is still going on. I'm talking to my family members who always dream to go to university to be a teacher. And every time my aunt, I talk to her, she always cry over the phone that whole my life I dreamed to be a teacher. Once she got the contract, Taliban took over, and now she's at home. So many other girls are same situation in Afghanistan, which is really heartbreaking to see that these things. Afghanistan went back to 25 years ago.
Yes, as you say, it really is a reversal for these women and girls in Afghanistan. Nahida and Firooza, thank you both for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you.
And as Firooza and Nahida were saying there, women and girls continue to be pushed out of the public eye and be denied their basic rights in the country. Well, that's all for our show tonight and the week. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll, of course, be back on Monday as Donald Trump marks 50 days in office, and we will be bringing you all the very latest from the developments next week. As we said, we expect members of the US administration to go to Saudi Arabia next week for talks on Ukraine. The news at 10 with Gillian is next. Good night.